All right, guys, we are going to take a look at one of the articles from Schmoop that I think is really important as we finish up of Mice and Men. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to have it read out loud. So here we go. If you've clicked on the link in your Google Classroom, you can follow along with my soothing, wonderful, educational voice. So we're going to tackle the idea of Mice and Men being having characters as archetypes. Okay, so we're going to go right under where it says symbolism, imagery, and allegory. While of Mice and Men occurs in a very specific time and place, each of the characters can be thought of as symbolizing broader populations. Though the book is not an allegory and each character can stand alone as simply a character, there's still something to be gained by looking at each character as a representative of their larger group. So here we go. Lenny is symbolic of the archetypal wise fool, who is mentally inferior but able to reveal the best and worst of others. Lenny's foolishness often allows him to speak honestly where others won't, and he sometimes taps into things that normal people can't, like the fact that the ranch isn't a good place for him and George to be hanging out. Lenny is also symbolic of people who are mistreated and discriminated against because of their mental handicaps. Curly's wife is symbolic of Eve, the female character who in the biblical story brings sin and death to the world. She is also symbolic of women everywhere who are repressed by male-centered societies. Curly is symbolic of small people who may feel inferior and overcompensate by inflating or flaunting their power and status. Crooks is symbolic of people who are discriminated against because of their race. Candy is symbolic of people who are undervalued and discriminated against because of their age. Carlson is symbolic of people who are oblivious to the feelings of others and who can only be concerned about something if it affects them personally. Slim is symbolic of the archetype of the hero, the king, or the leader. He presents those few who, in their wisdom and strength, seem larger than life. George is symbolic of the everyman, the type of normal, average person who is found everywhere and whose feelings and actions are neither exceptional nor terrible. He is the character with whom most readers will identify, as he symbolizes the difficulty of trudging through the everyday world and the extraordinary situations when you're just an ordinary guy. All right, so if you did like I did, go ahead and click next at the bottom of the page and we will continue. The pool by the river is the place where Lenny and George's story begins and ends. It is a safe sanctuary to meet and a place free from society where Lenny and George can be themselves. What happens in the grove stays in the grove. This is where the story is born and where the dream farm and Lenny meet their end. The bunkhouse represents the spot where conflict is most evident. Cruelty, violence, jealousy, and suspicion all arise here. Crooks's room represents the retreat and the jail cell of the repressed. Here we see the most obvious manifestations of discrimination: name-calling, isolation, fear, and the threat of death. The barn is representative of supposedly the safe place where animals can find shelter and warmth. It is a man-made place where humans take care of animals, which is symbolically ironic because it is where Lenny kills his puppy and Curly's wife. The dream farm is symbolic of Lenny and George's friendship. It is the thing that ties them together and keeps them working even when times are hard. It is also their personal form of religion, with the retelling of the dream serving as a form of litany or catechism. It is ultimately their version of heaven, so that when Lenny kills a human being, their chances of going there are forever ruined. Go ahead and click next again. We're going to talk about the rabbits. When George first tells the story of the dream farm, it's because Lenny's desperate for him to tell about what we're going to have in the garden, and about the rabbits in the cages, and about the rain and the winter and the stove. For George, the farm may symbolize freedom and happiness, but for Lenny, it is simply access to soft things, which is a freedom and a happiness of its own. Unfortunately, we know that the rabbits are just going to die. Even George is mostly interested in killing and eating them. They may be emblematic of a simple and idyllic life, but they're a fraught symbol. We know Lenny is excited about them because they'll be furry and lovely to pet, but we also know that Lenny tends to hurt whatever he pets. Lenny knows it too. At the end of the story, he hallucinates a gigantic rabbit that tells him he ain't fit to lick the boots of no rabbit. You'd forget him and let him go hungry. And he says all this in Lenny's voice. This enormous angry rabbit suggests that Lenny realizes deep down that he'll never have his dream. Come to think of it, neither do we. For all the talk about rabbits, the only one that appears in the book is this giant hallucinatory one. Like the Easter Bunny, these rabbits and the self-sufficiency they represent are nothing but a child's fantasy. Oops, did we just spoil it for you? All right, click next. We're going to talk about mice. Mice represent the false hope of a safe space for Lenny. The title is a good hint that mice are important here, but the first mouse we encounter is a dead one. Actually, it's a dead one that Lenny keeps in his pocket to pet. This is a huge clue. Lenny doesn't care much about death, and he's more concerned with comfort. Remembering this makes Lenny's death a bit more palatable. He'll be more comfortable if dead by his friend's gentle hand than with a violent end from Curly or the cage of an asylum. Mice are a source of comfort for Lenny as he links them to his nice Aunt Clara. In fact, they're all he remembers of her. But in addition to this warm reminder, mice also make it clear that Lenny suffers from the problem of hurting what he loves. He likes to pet soft things, which leads him to kill mice, his puppy, and Curly's wife. Thus, Lenny's happiness tends to end in some form of suffering. Like Lenny, mice suffer because they're small. A mouse's physical smallness leaves it vulnerable, while Lenny's mental smallness is his undoing. Finally, coming back to the title, mice like men suffer from the randomness of destiny. As the Burns poem goes, that you should be getting in a different station, both mice and men are victim to their best laid plans going awry. From the largest to the smallest creature, the most important to the least important man, destiny does not discriminate in laying out cruel fates. So at the end of the day, Lenny is on his own way, much like a mouse, killed because of his vulnerability and in spite of his innocence. Okay.